Okay, step with us into a federal courtroom in New York. The atmosphere is, well, incredibly tense. The stakes couldn't really be higher. We're talking about the sex trafficking and racketeering trial involving Sean Diddy Combs, who our source material today describes as being fighting for his life.
Yeah, and in a situation like this, facing accusations this serious, there's always that question people ask.
Yeah.
Who is actually there? Who shows up for someone?
Exactly. When a public figure is navigating such an intense legal storm, who stands by them? That's really the focus of this deep dive. We've got one core source guiding us today. It's a YouTube transcript from a legal news channel that gives observations from inside and outside that courtroom.
So our mission is to take this source material and, really unpack what it reveals about the visible support system around Mr. Combs during this incredibly difficult time. It gives us a kind of unique window into the human side of things, which people are often curious about in these big cases.
Absolutely. It's not just the legal maneuvers, it's the people around it all.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at what the source tells us about the scene, the people present, and importantly, their perspectives.
Right. Kicking off with the man himself
Yeah.
and the scene inside that courtroom, the source paints a picture of Sean Combs looking quite different from his, let's say, usual public image. They describe him as toned down, almost like a Mr. Rogers version of himself, wearing sweaters and slacks specifically.
That's a really striking image, isn't it? And according to the source, it wasn't just a personal choice. It mentions a judge's order actually limiting his clothing options for the trial, just 5 outfits allowed, and they had to be in muted colors. Think grays, browns, cream.
Wow.
Yeah, quite specific. So that feels like a deliberate effort to project a certain image, a real contrast to, the Diddy brand we usually say.
It definitely seems like a managed presentation. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And physically, the source also noted some changes. His hair is grayer. He's got a gray goatee, but his face is shaved otherwise.
Mhm.
They also mention his tattoos were covered up. Again, it all seems aimed at controlling that visual presentation for the jury.
Hmm. And his demeanor in court, was he just sort of sitting back, observing?
No, not according to the source.
Yeah.
They described him as a pretty active participant in his own defense. He was constantly seen jotting down notes, talking with his legal team.
Yeah.
The source specifically named Mark Agno, Brian Steele, and Tenny Garagos. He was clearly engaged, watching the witnesses, watching the jury very closely.
Okay. Were there specific moments where his reaction visibly shifted, depending on what was being said?
Yes, the source noted definite shifts. He was seen smiling and nodding during testimony he presumably liked, like when George Kaplan called him an icon, mentioned his achievements, or when Biggie was referenced.
Right.
But then he became noticeably more serious when Homeland Security investigators were on the stand and physical evidence was shown. Things like baby oil, Astroglide, high heels, sex toys, that kind of thing. It makes sense, obviously, that the more graphic stuff would get a different reaction.
Yeah, understandable. Okay, so he's engaged, his appearance is, let's say, curated. What about when he first walks into the courtroom each day? Does the source describe that entrance?
They do. It sounds like there was a bit of a routine. He'd typically hug his attorneys first, then he'd scan the gallery. It seemed like he was looking specifically for family and supporters. He often gives the love symbol gesture,
Okay.
and the source specifically saw him return that same gesture to a woman who was sitting in the public gallery. So it suggests he's very aware of who's in the room and acknowledging them.
Interesting. So he's scanning the room for familiar faces. Who is he seeing? Let's talk about the specific people the source noted were there inside the courtroom supporting him.
Well, the source said that day one, it was a pretty stacked courtroom, especially with family. That first day, his daughters were there, his mother, Janice Combs, his sons Justin and Christian Combs, and his adopted son, Quincy Brown.
That's quite a few.
Yeah. And Chance Combs and her mother were noted too, as was Dana Tran, who's the mother of his youngest daughter, Love. And significantly, Kim Porter's best friend, who helps care for the twins, was also present. So a really big family showing initially.
But that attendance wasn't consistent through the whole period the source observed, right? It changed.
That's right. His daughters and Chance Combs were reportedly not there in the second week. The source sort of speculated this might be because of things like prom and graduation back on the West Coast, suggesting maybe they flew back for those.
Okay, makes sense. And his mother, Janice.
She was there every single day the first week, according to the source, but they didn't see her in the second week. Again, the source wasn't totally sure why, but guess maybe similar reasons, travel or other commitments. But what was consistent, and the source highlighted this, was the presence of Diddy's sister, Keisha. She was apparently there every day during that second week, making sure at least one family member was present daily.
Right, so always some family representation. Beyond the immediate family, who was the most constant presence noted by the source?
That would definitely be Taruchi Finney, described as his best friend. The source really emphasized his unwavering presence, said he's been at every single court appearance, pre-trial hearings, every day of the trial they'd observed so far.
Wow, every single one.
Yeah. The source even mentioned that Taruchi had worn free puff gear at the pre-trial hearings, though he had to turn it inside out for the actual trial itself. He's always seen writing notes, just a very steady, visible support system right there in the room.
Okay. And there was also a specific appearance by Misa Hilton, Justin Combs' mother. The source said she actually explained publicly why she was there.
Yes, Misa Hilton was there, and the source talked about her Instagram post explaining her reason for attending. She specifically stated she was there to support her son, Justin, quoting him saying, "Mommy, I need you."
Ah, okay.
She framed it very much as a maternal duty, also mentioning she was on her own healing journey after an injury and was using a walker at the time.
And the source felt that context was important, given her previous comments.
Exactly. The source recalled that Misa Hilton had actually posted something after that video of Diddy and Cassie came out, saying Sean Combs needs help. So the source brings this up to show her stated reason for being in court was primarily about supporting her son through this, which is maybe a slightly different thing than, fully endorsing Diddy or his defense narrative. It adds a layer of complexity to the support picture.
That's a really interesting nuance. And of course, the courtroom wasn't only his supporters. The source mentioned others present just to give the full context.
Right, exactly. People like Lil Rod, who has his own civil suit against Mr. Combs tied to the allegations, and Doug Wigger, who represents Cassie, were also seen in the courtroom. The source included them just to show the mix of people involved, making it clear they weren't there supporting Diddy.
Okay, good context. Let's shift then from who was there to maybe what they believe or how they were behaving based on what the source observed. Particularly Taruchi Finney, his best friend, who you said was constantly there. The source shared his specific views.
Yeah, his perspective, as the source reported it, is really strong and stands in stark contrast to the charges. He apparently stated he wouldn't be there if he'd ever seen Diddy hit a woman. Regarding that Cassie video, he saw it but firmly believes that wasn't him, suggesting it looked, quote, drug-induced. He essentially contends that the relationship with Cassie was toxic, marked by domestic violence, yes, but not sex trafficking. That's a key distinction he's making.
And what about specific alleged events, like the freak-offs that have been mentioned in some reports? How did he frame those, according to the source?
According to the source, Taruchi called those events consensual. He explicitly said that, in his view, Cassie was the one bringing people in, not Diddy. He apparently found the idea that people were scared in those situations mind-boggling and believes everyone involved was a willing, consenting adult. So his narrative, as reported by the source, really pushes back against the prosecution's core trafficking charges, framing it all as domestic issues and consensual activity.
That's definitely a clear counter-narrative from someone close. Going back to the family, the source also made some, well, quite poignant observations about the children's reactions during testimony.
They did. The source observed Diddy's daughters and Chance leaving the courtroom during particularly graphic testimony. This is from Daniel Phillip, who was described as a male escort detailing sexual acts.
Oh.
Yeah, and this was significant because the source noted they stayed during Cassie's testimony. So the suggestion from the source was that they left specifically because of the extremely graphic nature of Daniel Phillip's account. I mean, the source noted it was tough for even the adults present to listen to, let alone hearing it about your own father.
Absolutely. And the source kind of connected this back to Cassie's testimony too, didn't they?
It did, yeah. The source pointed out that Cassie's own testimony suggested Diddy had largely kept his kids separate from his relationship with her, even though she apparently wanted to be more involved with his family. So the kids leaving during that really graphic third-party testimony but staying for Cassie's, well, it seems potentially consistent with that dynamic, perhaps. Maybe they felt, I don't know, more connected or was less jarring during Cassie's part, while the other stuff was just too much.
That makes a certain kind of sense. What about the public gallery or the overflow rooms? Any observations there from the source?
Yeah, the public is allowed in, obviously. The source reiterated seeing that initial exchange of the love symbol between Diddy and a woman in the public gallery early on. But they also described scenes in the overflow room that the source found, well, inappropriate, given the really graphic, R-rated nature of the testimony.
So.
The source noted hearing cackles at times and even
Mhm.
saw people bringing children, including a crying baby, apparently, just to watch the trial unfold. The source found this quite jarring, given the really serious and sensitive subject matter being discussed.
Wow, bringing a baby to this trial, that really speaks volumes about the public spectacle side of it all, doesn't it?
It certainly seems to, based on the source's account. It paints a picture of just intense public curiosity, maybe sometimes overshadowing the gravity of what's actually happening legally.
Okay, so we've covered the scene inside the court, the people there. Let's look outside the courthouse now. The source mentions some visible support starting to appear towards the end of that first week.
Yes, that's when free Diddy shirts started showing up outside the court building.
Right. And the source included some really interesting, maybe even surprising allegations about those shirts.
They did. The source reported allegations, it came from a TikTok video, and also someone they interviewed directly, that people were actually being paid $20 an hour to wear these free Diddy shirts.
Paid. Seriously.
Well, that was the allegation. The source included an anecdote about someone being offered the money but refusing, and then another person reportedly claiming they made $60 for wearing one for 3 hours. Now, it's really important. The source was clear they weren't sure if Diddy's official PR team was behind this. They speculated it could just be a passionate supporter or someone else entirely paying people. So it's presented very much as an allegation the source heard, not a confirmed fact about his team.
Got it. That's a crucial distinction. Reporting the allegation itself is found in the source. Did the source mention anything else happening outside related to the family or documenting things?
Yes, they observed a film crew that seemed to be traveling with the family in a Sprinter van. The source suggested this might mean they're making a documentary about the whole situation as another potential layer, right? How the narrative might be shaped for the public later on.
A documentary crew. Okay, so pulling all these threads together from the source, you've got the curated courtroom look, the constant presence of a best friend pushing a specific counter-narrative, the family support, which seems maybe layered or has different motivations. Then these public displays outside, including alleged paid participants, and even a film crew. What did the source suggest was the overall belief system holding this visible support structure together?
The source basically summarized it by saying the overall belief among the supporters and family, judging by their presence and the perspective shared, is that Sean Combs is not guilty of these specific federal charges, the sex trafficking and racketeering. They seem to view the core issues more as domestic violence within a toxic relationship, rather than the federal crimes alleged. And fundamentally, they're standing by his innocence on those counts.
Okay, so what does all this mean? Taking the source's observations as a whole, what does this picture of support reveal?
Well, this whole picture, the family, the friend, the public stuff,
Yeah.
it raises some really interesting questions, doesn't it? It shows how differently people can react to extremely serious allegations when it involves someone they're close to, someone they have a relationship with.
Yeah, and it really highlights how much personal loyalty or existing relationships can shape that response, sometimes leading to narratives that, well, diverge pretty sharply from the actual legal charges being faced.
Absolutely. When you put it all together, the controlled image in court, the friend's unwavering presence, and very specific counterarguments, the, let's say, nuances within the family support, plus the efforts outside the court, the source paints this picture of not just people showing up, but a kind of multifaceted effort, an effort to manage perception and maintain a counter-narrative while this legal storm rages.
It's definitely a complex mix of personal connection, maybe public strategy, and just different ways of seeing the same alleged events, all playing out under this incredibly intense spotlight.
Exactly. The source material really gives us a fascinating glimpse into those layers of human response that surround a huge, high-profile case like this one.
Which really leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Based on this source material, showing all these different layers, the personal connections, the public displays, these conflicting stories about what happened, what does it all tell us about how loyalty and public perception tangle with the complex and often very harsh realities of the legal system when famous figures are involved?